I posted before that I'm ashamed of my country and I was ashamed of my religion, both because of Donald Trump. And that shame continues in the worst possible way. Now, we all know about the threat that Donald Trump posted on social media calling for Iran to open the effing strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch, praise be to Allah. Then 24 hours ago, literally 24 hours ago, Trump decided to post this. His tweet, him threatening total regime change and to destroy an entire civilization, never to be brought back again. Those posts, and they're on the screen before you, are a crime. And I'll get to that sooner or later. But the shame of all of this comes from the fact that Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, in which Donald Trump was supposed to order strikes into Iran, he did nothing. He decided to say, okay, I'm not going to do it. We're going to go for peace. And him trying to tout this out as some kind of victory for Trump, when it really wasn't. It was a victory for Iran. Somebody probably told Trump, you can't do this. You can't even talk like this. Or it is a crime. It is a war crime. It is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Again, I'll speak on that later. But to illustrate how damaged Donald Trump is and how damaged he made America, I'm going to let Lawrence O'Donnell of MS Now explain to you. He made this report. Wow, now I'm only using the audio and doing a slideshow, a photo show, if you will, because of TikTok copyright purposes. But you'll understand how Donald Trump has damaged his credibility, although he's never had any kind of credibility, and more to the point, how he's damaged America's credibility. Mr. O'Donnell, take Donald Trump to church, if you please.
A whole civilization will die tonight. Hitler never said that. No head of state in the history of the world ever said that. Civilization had to wait literally thousands of years until today, April 7th, 2026, at 8:06 a.m., for a head of state to say and threaten a whole civilization will die tonight. No cruel king ever threatened that. No mass murdering tyrant anywhere in the world ever said that or even thought it was possible. And so the United States of America now must live with the permanent stain on our history that we are the only country in the world who has produced a head of state who said a whole civilization will die tonight. And with that statement, it could not be more tragically clear now that a whole civilization has already died. The whole civilization, beginning with the model of the British Parliament, leading to the first independent American government formed under the Articles of Confederation, followed by the Constitution that wrote the presidency into existence, and nearly 250 years of the American presidency, all of that whole civilization forming the presidency died with the elevation of Donald Trump to the presidency a second time, proving that it wasn't just an electoral college accident the first time. The country that claimed so self-righteously to be the conscience of the world, and sometimes, in some ways, came very close to reaching that ideal, elected a president who had been convicted of business fraud and covering up payments to a porn star in a failed attempt to keep her quiet about his sexual relationship with her while his third wife was still nursing his youngest child. A man who was indicted and criminally charged with violations of the Espionage Act and illegal possession of classified documents. A man who was indicted for conspiracy against the United States of America, for trying to overthrow a presidential election when that man was elected president of the United States the second time. The very fabric of the civilization that knitted the Constitution into an acceptable form of government for 13 states with varying and sometimes conflicting interests, and delivered a presidency often occupied by the most admired person in the country, and always occupied by someone who lived in awe of the civilization that produced the presidency. Until Donald Trump. This is what the collapse of a civilization looks like. The most ignorant person ever to appear on a presidential ballot, taking an oath that he could not possibly understand or ever follow. We Americans all have varying degrees of admiration for individual presidents, varying degrees of enthusiasm, positive and negative, about individual presidents. But even when we lived in full disagreement with a current president of the United States, we never feared him. And even when we lived in constant disagreement with a president of the United States, it remained effortless for most of us to retain our respect and even awe for the presidency itself. And that is what has died. When we pledged allegiance to the flag every morning at St. Brendan's Elementary School in Boston with a photograph of the President of the United States beside the flag, it felt the same, whether the President was a Republican or a Democrat. I don't know what they said in Catholic schools in America yesterday, in elementary schools or high schools, about the social media greeting the President of the United States gave to the world on Easter Sunday at 8:03 a.m. when he screamed the worst kind of profanity you can scream in print, threatening to destroy every power plant and every bridge in Iran, thereby promising to commit a war crime while ridiculing the religion of the people he intended to kill with those bombs. I don't know what they could have said in those schools. What could the teachers have said about that? I loved being a public school teacher at the beginning of my career, but I have no idea what I would say or could say to the elementary school students and high school students in Boston that I had in my classrooms if I had to speak to them this week with this president. 44 minutes after Donald Trump said this morning a whole civilization will die tonight and never be brought back again, they rang the bell on Wall Street to open the markets, and no one cared that the president had threatened a whole civilization because Wall Street knew he would back down. They've invented a phrase for that, to predict that. They expect that. They expect Donald Trump to back down. They expect Donald Trump to surrender on tariffs and everything else. And so it was a normal day of trading on Wall Street, while everyone there knew that Donald Trump had announced an 8 p.m. Tuesday night deadline tonight for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, or he would blow up everything he could in Iran. As he put it, a whole civilization will die tonight. Wall Street knew those words were empty. As poisonous and insane and criminal as those words are, Wall Street was right to believe those words were empty and that Donald Trump would not actually go through with the full insanity of his threat. But the words themselves actually do fit the description of a war crime. Just the words themselves, just the threat. That is against the law. Article 51 of the Geneva Conventions which has been adopted by the United States as law that applies to everyone in the United States, including the president, says acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian population, are prohibited. Threats like that are prohibited. They are against the law. They are a war crime. What Donald Trump said was a war crime. What Donald Trump did was try to terrorize not just the Iranian regime with his empty threats, but the entire population of Iran, all 91 million people. He wanted them to believe he was going to kill them all so that they would then rise up today against the regime and overthrow their government and then instantly make peace with Donald Trump. A version of that fantasy was actually predicted by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a meeting in the Situation Room in February, described in important new reporting in the New York Times today by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. The Netanyahu presentation about how successful an American and an Israeli war against Iran could be was described to Donald Trump after the meeting by his CIA director as farcical, which, according to the Times reporting, Marco Rubio had to translate for Donald Trump into a profane word that Donald Trump uses publicly all the time, because Donald Trump couldn't possibly know what farcical means. Marco Rubio knew that. He knew it had to be translated. The New York Times reporting makes it very clear now that the people who have been alleging that Benjamin Netanyahu talked Donald Trump into this war now have tremendous support for that position, according to sources within the Trump government and possibly the Israeli government. The Times does not reveal the sources, but does include details in the Situation Room that can only be described by Trump people who were actually in that room and then secretly revealed it to the New York Times. Vice President J.D. Vance emerges from the reporting as the only clear opponent of Donald Trump's war in meetings with Donald Trump. The rest of Donald Trump's advisors and cabinet were clearly afraid to take a position that Donald Trump might not like. And so Marco Rubio, who was in the room as both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, has proved himself by this reporting to be the worst National Security Advisor in history, who gave the president no advice about what to do, no advice about whether he should go to war or not go to war. Right-wing provocateur and Trump voter Tucker Carlson is quoted in the reporting in a telephone conversation with Donald Trump, which is an indication that Tucker Carlson may well be one of the sources for this reporting. It was just a discussion between those two people, so the version of that discussion would have to come from one of them. In a discussion about going to war in Iran, the Times reports, a couple of weeks before the war began, Mr. Trump, who had known Mr. Carlson for years, tried to reassure him over the phone. "I know you're worried about it, but it's going to be okay," the president said. Mr. Carlson asked how he knew. "Because it always is," Mr. Trump replied. The rank stupidity of Donald Trump, as it appears in that passage, is in every paragraph of the Times report. When Donald Trump went around the room to get everyone's opinion before finally announcing his decision, he got absurd responses from everyone there except Vice President Vance. His CIA director, according to the New York Times, offered no opinion on whether to proceed. His always incompetent White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, according to the New York Times, quote, told Mr. Trump that if he felt he needed to proceed for America's national security, then he should go ahead. It is exactly the kind of spineless, mindless counsel you imagine the most ignorant president in history, who has chosen his cabinet and his advisors for their weakness and for their blind and stupid loyalty, would get. Bombs do not produce permanent change. Bombs cannot kill a whole civilization. And so a whole civilization will not die tonight. But Donald Trump's war crime of threatening such terror, the only person in control of nuclear weapons who has ever promised such terror, is a moral stain that will live in the pages of our American history forever. That will not die. That will be with us forever. The stain of Donald Trump.
And there you have it. The fact that Donald Trump did something that Adolf Hitler didn't do, although he was directly responsible for the so-called final solution to the Jewish question that resulted in the Holocaust. Even Adolf Hitler didn't publicly threaten, either by his radio announcements, him screaming, him doing all of his arms like this, trying to make a tough guy. Even Adolf Hitler didn't do that. Donald Trump did. And by doing that, forget the fact that he just painted our country as a terrorist state. Forget the fact that our country's president is now worse than Adolf Hitler. That's no news, considering the fact that he already is. Forget the fact that Donald Trump has done all of that. What he's done was a crime. As you saw earlier, Lawrence O'Donnell explained it. He violated the Geneva Convention, even making threats of doing it, aside from doing it completely, is a crime. I am calling for the international community, for the rest of our allies and people in this country to put him to trial. This has got to stop. This insanity Donald Trump has created needs to end. Donald Trump has already wrecked the American economy. Things in this country are completely out of control because of him. But now he has crossed the line to committing war crimes and violating the Geneva Convention, and more to the point, has painted a bullseye on this country. Even his own vice president, who I have no love for, because J.D. Vance, you're a scumbag. You'll always be a scumbag. History will remember you as a scumbag. And even if by some unholy miracle that you become president of the United States after Donald Trump is gone, whether it be him being impeached or you being elected in 2028, you will always be a scumbag. And that goes for the rest of the Republican Party that stays silent about this. You want to scream law and order. We believe in law and order. Well, Donald Trump has broken the law. Passed beyond the Epstein files. Passed beyond the financial schemes and cover-ups that Lawrence O'Donnell explained earlier. Donald Trump has violated the Geneva Convention. But I'm going to say this last thing, and I'm going to close out this video. Right now, as I'm talking to you, it is Wednesday, April the 8th, that I'm making this video. Everybody in the MAGA world is trying to tout this as a great victory for Donald Trump. We got him. We crushed him. We went eyeball to eyeball with them and they blinked, to borrow a old phrase during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We didn't win a damn thing. Iran won. Iran won by showing how weak our president is, by showing how stupid our president is, by exposing the man as a would-be war criminal. Iran then launched an attack on the United States in response to what Trump did. That Trump said this past couple of days. What the Iranian people did, and I saw this for a fact, they linked arms and surrounded power plants. So if Trump actually did follow through on this threat, Iranian citizens would be killed, and we would have no choice but to admit the fact that our government sanctioned a massacre. That our government actually murdered innocent people. So you didn't win a damn thing, MAGA. You didn't win anything at all. All you did was show Donald Trump is nothing more than an ignorant, psychopathic fool who is going to get our innocent people killed. And now he's capitulated. Now he's backed off his threats for a couple of weeks. Then he's probably going to do it again for another couple of weeks. Then another couple of weeks. Then another couple of weeks. Then another couple of weeks. Maybe he might back off his threats till before, just before the midterms. This needs to stop. And the only way for it to stop now is to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump and his cabinet, because PXF, you're involved in this too. J.D. Vance, you're involved in this too. All of you are complicit in this. Point is this, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump is a criminal. And I got the receipts to prove it. And I got the law on my side. What do you got? You got a loudmouth on Truth Social who can barely stay awake during his press briefings, who is completely triggered when anyone says something wrong about him. I got victory on my side. I got America on my side. What you got? Nothing but a would-be dictator who's only steps away from going to prison for whatever life he has left. And it'll be no one's fault but his. CTP, no truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.